article that was just posted at 9:37 p.m. says that bill is dead. Or that Meekhoff says it's dead.
Meekhoff says it's dead?
That's what I'm reading.
Can we get an amen, everybody?
Amen.
I
wouldn't trust Meekhoff if he was on fire. And, No.
We've got a little something that
might not help him if he was on fire either.
About people
like
Arlen
Meekhoff. Enthusiasts
Meekhoff.
will be able to grow pot at home. After all, a state senate failed on Thursday to muster a supermajority.
He couldn't even get it out of the
changes in
Senate. There was no way it was coming out of the House.
But
Meekhoff
Jamie,
says he wanted to
if those extra session days materialize, then all of that's not correct.
Meekhoff is saying, I'm very disappointed. I knew it would be a heavy lift.
It's possible he just didn't have the votes, so he didn't even bring it up, but it's also possible that he adds the days for other legislation.
I mean, don't worry. Guys, listen. Don't worry. Arlen Meekhoff is going to find other creative ways to fuck us.
Well, he did articulate many things in this bill that could be used in subsequent sessions for people. So.
And we've seen a pattern of legislators that come out of their regular life going into the cannabis industry. We see dickhead Carlton. I'm sorry, I believe that's his first name.
Benedict.
Actually. Right, Benedict. Not dickhead, Benedict. Thank you.
Benedict.
Both apply. Benedict Carlton, yep, and others, plus his former chief of staff, and then also Senator Jones's former chief of staff.
Yeah.
If you look at Rick Johnson, whose lobbying firm, he was a former House of Representatives Speaker of the House. His lobbying firm handled cannabis clients. So when we think about people like Meekhoff, they could certainly be looking at this industry as a payday on their exit. That's a golden parachute, Michael.
I think what's his face? Kesto's. I think he's going into the practice of law that will be somehow involved with.
He's so slimy.
He is. He really is.
Well, having dealt with a lot of different legislators, I've seen some people with incredible integrity that are willing to champion causes even though they know they have no chance of success. And then I've seen people willing to spread their ass cheeks for anybody with a dick hard. And
we had this discussion earlier, me and Josh.
Like
And Josh, feel free to opine in if you'd like.
He's a piece of...
Try to defend yourself. No. We were talking about the...
he perked up a little bit when Rick was just talking.
His comments, his look at... So everyone... I think, listen, I don't want to be misunderstood because I have said all along it's very difficult for the system to even be contemplated as even being functional if you do not include the caregivers and let the caregivers have access to it. I've been a big fan of that. And the last article... I tried to make that point, like this last announcement by Lara that they're not going to, quote-unquote, punish licensees for getting cannabis from the caregivers, seals the deal, whether they like it or not. That system can't work without caregivers.
Can you imagine how bad it would have been if they got their way and stopped caregiver overages transferred to dispensaries all the way back in 2017? Remember when they originally postulated this?
Yep.
If they had...
They just reaffirmed what they said they were, what they know has been going on but haven't acknowledged.
Right,
I mean, it's a Joanne, which people have been criminally charged.
The whole year.
No, there's irony all of it.
Oh, and I don't believe they've... Just
to be clear, they never actually officially said that caregivers could sell. All they said
I never
was...
said that.
All they said...
I said that the licensees, Judge, don't argue with me. I said it clearly. I want to be clear. It was that they are not punishing applicants for accepting marijuana from caregivers.
Right.
Correct.
In the application process, but criminally,
right. So even legally, even when pushed to the tilt, they still won't say,
"Okay,
this is legal."
But I'm saying,
if somebody did get enforcement enforced upon, this would be your argument that
Right.
Sure. Those kind of technicalities are called a lawyer's dodge for a very good reason because
it's not legal advice, but it's a proclamation.
It's definitely
of some kind
not legal.
That okay, the argument that their best argument is it's asymmetrical.
It is asymmetrical. How'd that go last time?
Right, but to suggest that one would be okay and somehow the other one is not is absurd. Okay, so and I don't know what court of reasonableness, even though it's being said, but that's not the argument. That's what I'm talking about. We're talking about instead was Kesto's legislation, where he's proposing that the industry laws of percentage of ownership be increased to 5% or less,
less than
5%,
that would just not be subject to the backgrounds,
but higher than the 1% that exists,
and not be subject to preclusion on the application by those individuals in that percentage being subject to background checks or whatever. But it came off in such a weird way. I mean, I could think of a lot of other ways to have framed that issue. He seemed to suggest, because the debate in the article turned to, well, there's a lot of people that are trafficking illegal funds, and they want to get in this industry, and we're not going to let it, but this 5% lets them in with their illegal money, and you don't get to know who they are. That's how he kind of framed it, or that's how the argument framed it. There's so many better ways to frame that. There's, it's. I don't
necessarily know if that was the crowd that he was catering on behalf of.
Of course, he wasn't. I'm saying the takeaway was that he's like, the people that are putting the money up shouldn't be background checked, and they're lifting a preclusion that was normally intended for a certain character or certain applicant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there are people that are being penalized. Industry is being penalized to a certain degree because of this. It's become an unreasonable.
I don't think you can characterize it as the industry is being penalized. There's certainly plenty of people that are able to successfully complete the application process, even though they have that 1%.
That is true.
But they're being penalized in the sense that if somebody is,
I don't know about plenty. How many licenses?
There's over 800 applications already applied, so that's plenty.
Well, they haven't been approved.
So what? They all know that there's 1%. They all know that requirement's there.
Well, the point would be that if it was
the applications
if you had
process
5% of an interest in a company that was had a lot of money, and whatever the value of that is, that 5% is not a certain value.
I appreciate the value of going to 5. I do, but I'm just saying 1%.
But the point I'm trying to make is that it puts enough juice in the gives you enough juice in the game where you could get that money from an investment group of 150 people that don't want to have to disclose their information, but their joint investment in their private account should be enough, and that should be able to be done that way.
All of those members are less than 5 on that. Right.
So the point being that that's really the incentive. And they talked about that at the marijuana law section of how Lara recognized the problem with that it may be intended to flush out, money that would not normally be traceable, or that there would be questions of that person's involvement, what their background is, what their percentage is, and how they, how do they get that? So that's the bend, right? You want to open it up to people so they can put 5%, 5% of their investment in, and not have to, have their group be, and the other side is to keep those that out that maybe theoretically. Now,
second time around, the rules should be more loose than more tight. Right, I agree.
Well, so they're trying to open that up.
Well, it seems
but
like
the way
only
that he
reason...
was defending it was by saying there should, it inevitably defends the trafficking. You can't help if your intention was to keep it out, and now you're not going to do it anymore. What about those? If that was your rule before, right? That's really the question. It's not I'm just saying the debate here inherent in this article.
It's a strong argument against that provision. What were you saying, Jim?
I was just saying that I think that ultimately the only reason why this rule had to be created, because I think ultimately when you look at the actual original language, a lot of people could have met the 1%, requirement as it was, but the reality of how the board is and how the Lara is implementing the rules has led to a massive pushback, including in the form of lobbying, which has resulted in a law like this, where it's basically, hey, there needs to be a way to enter this market that makes this process more efficient, because as Rick pointed out, there's over 800 applicants, and Lara is saying we're extending caregiver access for another month or two, and the reality is that there's 10 existing operating grow facilities in the state.
I know, there's only one that's harvested, and they're charging
right. And even if each of those places have 5,000 plants, that's less than it's 5% of the entire caregiver population. I mean, it's unsustainable.
Josh, at the beginning of this, I was proclaiming how important I thought it was that the caregivers, and that the system won't really work unless there are caregivers. Now, this is contrary to the existing system, and there's a lot of opportunity for potentially Prop 1 and its implementation to level that a little bit, because there has to be a reconciliation of some kind, we would say, of whether or not the board is going to continue to exist, and if so, in what form, if it's going to exist, and the fact that Prop 1 leaves the licensing process on Lara alone. It does not require the appointment of a board. And one could argue, why would we want to have those two decisions for each of them being not in the same authority. And a good argument can be made that Lara does this anyways. Lara's really the ones that, give licenses. If you've ever heard Shelley Eggert do her thing, she goes, we give licenses. We got a million licenses. We super something like that. Some outrageous.
They license almost every type of business that requires a state license in the state.
Now, they do have like a liquor commission. They have a state bar. They've got a physician.
There's specialty departments for
so
different
they can have a
industries.
specialty department, but it's less subjective. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think
the process is not jacked up because the legislature gave them a jacked up process.
They put a hurdle in there that became political.
Right.
When you start with a position that is appointed from a party, it's inherently.
And the party designation was originally intended to ensure that the governor didn't flood it with his own party, and it's basically just set up to prove that the governing party doesn't have more than 3 seats on the 5-seat board, but it does end that whole political nonsense in there.
Right, and it's obviously it is. I mean, listen, where we stand right now was not the intended plan. I maintain we probably would have still been here, even if it had been a little looser, because you're going to need caregivers in the end. And they got to figure out a way to work that in.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's problematic. It's failing. There may be 800.
Did you expect anything else?
The approval process, you mean?
The approval process. Now,
you guys didn't expect it.
But the problem is, even when these things get going, which very few can really function like within the idyllic system that's been built, not even close. It's not even realistic. It's going to be so much time before that market can compete with the existing market, the caregivers, right? Yeah. Whatever people are buying it for is a price that's been determined over 9 years.
Right.
Okay.
The caregivers have set the current market value of cannabis.
So now you're going to stop that. You're going to create an artificial market, which we know what the prices are. The growers want to make money, of course. Yeah. But to me, the only way to offset this is to flood the market with licenses. Make it be survival of the fittest. Make it true, like capitalistic economics. Prove the licenses and let the strong survive. Yep. Right? Whoever's the best business model.
Lara is empowered to control the amount of cannabis in the system, so Lara can restrict cultivation rights. Even if someone gets a 1,500 plant grow, Lara could at some point in the future say you can only grow 1,000 because there's too much cannabis in the system. So,
where do you take that authority from?
From the MMFLA language. It says that they have.
I will tell you this,
in the language itself, or are you talking about?
I would say during drafting, we were instructed that the regulator would have that ability, whether or not it was written into the language specifically.
Josh, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. I think that's accurate.
You're about to get regulated.
Lara can reduce.
Lara is allowed to, ultimately cut off the supply of licenses.
Control.
Cut off the supply of licenses, but not.
I think it actually says control the supply of.
Right.
But let me make your point, though, Michael. You're talking about how important caregivers are to the system. Let's consider this right now. That we know that caregivers exist and the MMFLA system exists and then the black market exists. Most medical patients utilizing caregivers need to have a distribution center available for when their caregiver is not able to satisfy their needs. We've been talking about this for years and years, how dispensaries are an essential component of a regular caregiver-driven system because it helps to supplement and offer alternative products that a caregiver can't provide. But if there's no caregiver system, then the patients just are in the black market. It's either the MMFLA or the black market, and they'll never come to the MMFLA because it's more expensive, it's got a lot of hassles. So having the caregiver system there inherently supports the MMFLA businesses because it gives people an alternative to the black market through the caregiver system and then through the supplemental purchases they make at distribution centers. So caregivers, I think, Michael, your point is exactly right. They are going to be integrals to the success of all of these programs.
I'm saying also they may want to buy some specialty cannabis.
Yeah.
There's people that have been growing cannabis their entire lives, family heirlooms passed down generation after generation. How it, and they may not be hired into the system, but they should certainly be able to take their goods to the market and have access to sell it on the state level. It's not there yet, and even the micro grows don't work. But I mean, that may be something that people want to consider, or some access to that.
Because you're not going to pay $20 a gram if your dealer normally sells it for $7, right? I mean, it's a real tough thing to come up to. So, but I think caregivers will always be an important part of the system, and that they'll supplement the success of businesses. I also think caregivers are important because it's a knowledge base, and it's a skill set, and it's a community in the state. When we talk about giving legalized people the ability to grow 12 plants, those people need